The one you thought was the perfect person was the one you should have stayed away from years ago. I'm 26 now, and I've had my fair share of relationships. Most of them didn't last long, sometimes because the timing was wrong and other times because something just never felt quite right. There was one girl I knew for several years. Her name was Eden. Eden was funny, easy to talk to, and effortlessly easy to get along with. We became close friends during our school years and spent a lot of time around the same social circles. For a while, she was simply someone I enjoyed being around. When school ended, life happened the way it often does. People moved on, followed different paths, and gradually lost touch. Eden and I were no exception. Our conversations became less frequent, our contact slowly faded, and eventually we went our separate ways like everyone else. I stayed in touch with my close circle of friends after school. About a year later, through a chain of mutual friends, Eden found her way back into my life. We started talking again, and before long our conversations became a regular part of my day. The more we spoke, the more I found myself developing feelings for her. But along with reconnecting came stories I couldn't ignore. I kept hearing about Eden sleeping with different men, using dating apps, and openly bragging about her body count to anyone willing to listen. Her friend Michaela wasn't just an audience for it. She seemed to encourage and celebrate it. At the time, I brushed it aside. I told myself it was just people in their mid-20s doing what they wanted before settling down. Looking back, I wasn't thinking clearly. Instead of paying attention to the warning signs, I kept making excuses and continued to be there for Eden. What I didn't understand much at that point was that people can have hidden motives. As I spent more time with Eden on nights out with friends, I started noticing signs that she didn't see me as anything more than a friend, if that. At times, it felt as though she saw me more as a convenience or even a wallet than someone she genuinely cared about. At the bar, I'd buy myself a drink, and she'd look at me as though I was expected to get her the first round of the night as well. When we were making our way through packed clubs on Saturday nights, I'd take her hand so we wouldn't get separated from the group. The crowds were shoulder to shoulder, and I often let myself take the bumps and shoves from people around us to make things easier for her. Yet there were moments when she'd suddenly pull her hand away and walk off without a word. Then came the part that bothered me the most. We would be sitting together at a table in a club, and she'd openly talk about some random guy she had been messaging who was coming to pick her up and take her home. More than once I offered to make sure she got home safely myself, but she always refused. Sometimes she seemed irritated that I had even asked. I wasn't looking for an argument. I wasn't trying to control her choices. I just wanted to know she was safe. Eventually, I stopped pushing the issue. If she didn't want my help, there wasn't much else I could do, so I left her to make her own decisions. A while later, another night out came around. This time, Eden and Michaela invited me at the last minute. It didn't take long for me to figure out why. As the night went on, I found myself being treated as the person expected to buy drinks again. Michaela even commented on how popular I was. To be fair, she wasn't wrong. Between work and mutual acquaintances, a lot of people in our area seemed to know who I was. At one point, Michaela leaned over and whispered in my ear that they needed to help Eden find someone willing to buy her a drink. I just smiled and replied, "Good luck with that." By then, I was starting to see things more clearly. The pattern was becoming harder to ignore. Later that night, I watched as Eden and Michaela continued their usual routine, looking for attention and handouts from whoever was willing to provide them. Whether they couldn't support themselves or simply expected others to do it for them, I didn't know. At that point, I wasn't sure it mattered. The final straw came a few days before Christmas. Another meet. Another situation where I felt discarded the moment I was no longer useful. Once again, Eden disappeared off with someone else, leaving me standing there wondering why I had continued investing my time and energy into someone who had shown so little consideration in return. That was strike three. For the first time, I stopped making excuses for her. I stopped telling myself there was a deeper reason behind her behavior, or that things would eventually change. I finally accepted what had been in front of me all along. Whatever I thought Eden could be, she wasn't. I was on the verge of giving up. Even my best friend Jake had finally had enough. After work one day, he pulled me aside and said what everyone else had probably been thinking for months. Enough is enough. I wasn't doing well financially, and mentally I wasn't much better. People had noticed. Jake certainly had. He told me that ever since Eden had come back into my life, I seemed to have lost more than I had gained. My peace of mind had disappeared, my money seemed to be going down the drain, and I was constantly chasing something that was never going to happen. It's time to stop, goddammit. For once, I didn't argue, I just nodded. He was right. When the new year arrived, I decided to get my life back in order. I joined the gym during the first week of January. Eden said she would join me, but I doubted she would, and I was right. Before long, she had met someone new and slipped into what I jokingly called her Mrs. Happy Wife phase, while I was busy sweating through workouts and traveling abroad with friends. Months passed. I stayed focused. I earned a promotion at work. I bought the car I had wanted for years through relentless saving and discipline. I stopped going on random nights out and only went when I knew it wouldn't set me back financially or leave me feeling worse the next day. Slowly, life started moving forward again. Then, after her latest relationship fell apart, I got a message from Eden. "When's the next night out?" Maybe she meant exactly what she wrote. Maybe she didn't. But to me, it translated as, "When are you buying me drinks again?" This time, I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was simply done. Looking back, the entire experience was eye-opening. For a long time, I had been focused on who I thought Eden could become rather than who she actually was. The more I worked on myself, the more I realized that if we had ever ended up in a relationship, I would have been carrying both of us. She didn't work. She couldn't drive. She seemed to rely heavily on other people to solve problems and get through everyday life. Meanwhile, I was trying to build stability, advance my career, and create a future for myself. The truth was simple. Had I stayed invested, I would have ended up in a far worse position than I was already in. Eventually, Eden noticed the unanswered messages and the lack of interest from my side. She realized she wasn't getting anywhere. She tried arranging another night out. When that didn't work, she suggested meeting up in person. I agreed, not because I wanted to rekindle anything, but because I wanted to bring the chapter to a close. We met at a small coffee shop. I arrived a few minutes late, partly because I had a family call that needed my attention, and partly because I wanted to make sure she ordered her own coffee rather than waiting for me to do it. When I walked in, she was already there. I headed straight to the counter and ordered my drink. As I turned around, she tried to greet me with a hug from behind. I stepped away. "Don't," I said calmly. There was no anger in my voice, no emotion, really, just certainty. I took my coffee and sat down across from her with a blank expression. For the first time since she had re-entered my life, I wasn't there as the hopeful friend chasing her approval. I was there to end the story. For a while, the conversation stayed superficial. She asked about my car, my job, and how I had been doing since December. I kept my answers brief and gave away very little. My life was my business now. Then the conversation took an unexpected turn. She started talking about the future and suddenly asked how many seats my car had. 5, I replied. "Why?" She smiled slightly and said that one day she'd like to put a baby seat in the back. I frowned. "Why would you ask that?" She hesitated before answering. "Because I want us to be together. We've known each other for so long. It just feels right." I stared at her in silence. 10 seconds passed. In those 10 seconds, all I could think about was the timing. Not when I was struggling, not when I was spending money I couldn't afford to spend, not when I was always available, always trying, always hoping, but now, after the promotion, after the car, after getting into shape, after rebuilding my life. Now she wanted a future together. The silence ended. "No." The answer came immediately. She looked stunned. "What? Why?" For the first time, I answered with complete honesty. "This could have happened years ago." I held her gaze. We could have been together. But every chance there was, you chose someone else. You ditched me more times than I can count. You expected me to spend money on nights out and trips, and half the time I felt like I was only there when it was convenient for you. I shook my head. I gave my time, my effort, my attention, and my money. I can't remember many times I even got a simple thank you. Her expression crumbled. Then came the tears. Maybe they were genuine. Maybe they weren't. By that point, it didn't matter. I'd seen too many situations in life where tears appeared only after consequences arrived. Whether she was hurt, regretful, or simply upset that things hadn't gone the way she expected, it wasn't my responsibility to figure out anymore. People around the coffee shop started glancing in our direction. I stood up. "I think we're done here." She looked up at me, speechless. "Good luck, Eden. I genuinely mean that. But it's time for both of us to move on." Without another word, I picked up my coffee and walked away. For years, I had thought walking away from Eden would feel like losing something important. Instead, for the first time in a very long time, it felt like peace.